Like here, yeah.
Yeah.
Like here.
Hello, come.
Yeah. How cool.
She has moved from being like a big city girl to a suburban woman.
Yeah.
She said it's a new phase in her life. She's got a place of her own.
Yeah.
First time ever.
I didn't get that part of the nursing part, just so good. And she said she's moved, and I was like, wow, that's so good. Sydney obviously, but that's all right.
I was going to say, their loss is our gain. Yeah. Speaking English.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Who's that?
No. They just went out.
We've been just talking about you. Yeah.
Always late.
No, actually, you're not late. You're right on time. It's kind of just turned 3 o'clock, so you're right on time.
Oh,
The Heart Sutra.
Heart Sutra. I prostrate to the
Triple Gem does it here. At one time, the Bhagavan was running the mass Bhajans mountain and pray community of Bodhisattvas.
At that time, Bhagavan was absorbed in the concentration of the categories of phenomena
called profound perception.
Also, at that time, the Bodhisattva was
perfection of wisdom and gets also as empty of inherent nature.
Then, through the
powerful Buddha just said this to the How should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the divine perfection of wisdom? Said this to Shariputra, any son of the lineage of the lineage, wishing to practice divine perfection of wisdom like this correctly and repeatedly, beholding those 5 gates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form, emptiness is not other than form, form is also not other than. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, composition, practice, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness without characteristics, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not deficient, not fulfilled. In emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no composition, practice, no consciousness. No eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. There is no I element and so on, up to including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extension of ignorance and so on, up to including no aging and no extension of aging. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and there is no exalted wisdom, no attempt, and also no unattained. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no Bodhisattvas, perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear, having completely passed beyond each. All the Buddhas in the world 3 times also manifestly completely awakened to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of the great knowledge, the mantra equal to the unequal, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering should be known as the truth to the North Poles. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared. Dayata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhisattva. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasatva, should train in profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan arose in that concentration and commanded Bodhisattva Mahasatva, Arya Avalokiteshvara saying, well said, son of lineage, it is like that, it is like that. One should practice to find perfection of wisdom, as you've indicated, even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagavan, having thus spoken, the Venerable shout about the future, Sapama, Sapa, Arya Avalokiteshvara, and those surrounding in their entirety, along with the words of gods, spoken by the Bhagavan. Go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the houses, and from the accumulations that I gather from listening to the teachings, may I attain the state of a Buddha to be able to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the houses, and from the accumulations that I gather from listening to the teachings, may I attain the state of a Buddha to be able to benefit all sentient beings. Refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the houses, and the accumulations. Listen to the teachings, may I attain the state of Buddha to be able to. I feel like complaining about the heat. It's already hot, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it is. Can't wait.
I wouldn't say hot, I'd say warm.
Sorry?
Thursday, tomorrow. Is that tomorrow?
What's happening tomorrow?
Oh.
Don't talk to me about it.
It's pleasantly warm.
It's a heat wave, 27 degrees. Anyway, so second. So let's just look at the flow of things before we continue. So we said that continuing from chapter number 4 that teaches conscientiousness with respect to the training, the method for guarding the training is guarding the mind. The method for guarding the mind is guarding mindfulness and alertness, or mindfulness and introspection. So we guard the mind because wrongdoing depends upon the mind, because good qualities depend upon the mind, because it says that everything depends upon the mind. So Shantideva says at the beginning of the chapter, whatever we occasion to meet, be good or bad, it depends upon the mind. And therefore it is crucial to guard the mind. So when we said that wrongdoing depends on the mind and qualities depend on the mind, we have here the good qualities of the 6 perfections. We had a bit of Olaf saying still 12 degrees. Where are you, Olaf? Olaf, where are you?
He wants to come. You want to go there?
Yeah, I'm joining you, Olaf, wherever you are. If you're, I don't know, it's Stockholm, I'm coming.
We're in Perth, WA.
Okay, well, that's good.
Southwest.
I rejoice for your good karma. So, qualities depend upon the mind. So these are the qualities here that are broken down according to the 6 perfections. But when you look at giving, ethics, patience, choice, effort, concentration, and wisdom, you could say that also they're qualities of hearers and solitude realizers. Now, so although the breakdown here is according to the 6 perfections, you can say that also in general, these good qualities are also absolutely essential for those who follow the Hinayana vehicle, for hearers and solitude realizers, because they also practice generosity, definitely ethical discipline, patience, joyous effort. They need a lot of joyous effort in order to attain liberation. They need to practice absorption, concentration that is calm abiding, and they also need wisdom in order to eliminate the affliction. They also need wisdom that realizes emptiness in order to attain the state of liberation. So although it seems that the breakdown here is according to the 6 perfections, and particularly it is the 6 perfections, it is because here Shantideva explains the guide to Bodhisattva way of life, I think that in general, we would say that any practitioner needs to guard the mind, because any wrongdoings that they commit depends upon the mind, and any qualities, Hinayana or Mahayana, depend upon the mind. So today we picked up from the statement that also wisdom depends upon the mind. I think that it was straightforward. So therefore, if wrongdoings depend upon the mind and qualities depend upon the mind, then we're making effort in guarding the mind. So we spoke about this, and we also started with the method for guarding the mind, guarding mindfulness and introspection. So what I thought of doing today was to look at some of the verses that we've covered, to look at what mindfulness is and what introspection or alertness is, speak about it, to have a bit of discussion about it, and also cover a couple of secondary offenses. Before we start with that, I'm wondering if there are any questions. All right. So at home, I read through some of the verses that we've covered, and I picked up just a couple of minor points. Thought it nice to just have some more clarity with respect to them. So I think that today we started with verse 18 that provides. We spoke about wisdom that relies upon the. Wisdom relies upon the mind, as good qualities depend upon the mind. Let's look at the text. So the text says, even those who wish to obtain happiness and overcome suffering will wander with no aim if they do not comprehend the secret of the mind, the principal Dharma. What is the secret of the mind? If you were to just answer it in one sentence, what is the secret of the mind? The ultimate nature of the mind. Best, that's like 100% mark for an answer. The ultimate nature of the mind, the emptiness of the mind, the Buddha nature of the mind, Buddha lineage of the mind, the absence, the clear light of the mind, the absence of true existence of the mind, emptiness of inherent existence of the mind. All of them are stating the same thing, the ultimate truth in relation to the mind. That is the secret of the mind. Why is it secret? It is actually nicely explained in Khenpo Kunpen's presentation. I think that it was in section 149. Sorry, so it was in the previous one. 146. So it says, wisdom knowledge also arises from the mind. That's wisdom. Even though all people, wherever they may be, are endowed with the meaning or the supreme point of the Dharma, of the knowable, which is the nature of the mind, the ultimate nature of the mind, the luminosity which is empty and without any identity, they do not comprehend or realize it. Therefore, it is secret. Right? So the most supreme point of the mind is the emptiness of the mind. Because most people don't realize it, they do not know it, it is secret. So this is why Shantideva calls it in this verse. If they do not comprehend the secret of the mind, that which is unknown, the principal Dhamma, they will wander in cyclic existence, will know him, and will not be able to obtain happiness and to overcome suffering. So that is not only for bodhisattvas, but it's also for hearers and solitary realizers. Whoever might be that person, they will not get long-lasting happiness without realizing the emptiness of the mind. Which is also, you can say that it is indicative that here Shantideva explains that from the viewpoint of the middle way consequence school of thought, right? So whoever might be that person, even Hinayanist, if they do not realize the emptiness of the mind, which means emptiness of phenomena, selfnesses of phenomena, they will still continue to experience suffering. So this is clearly a middle way consequence school presentation. So then it says in verse 18, this being so, I shall hold and guard my mind well. Except for the mode of conduct of guarding the mind, what use are many other modes of conduct? So there is a particular term that is used in Tibetan called tulshuk, mode of conduct. Except for the mode of conduct of guarding the mind, what use are many other mode of conduct? So this word tulshuk has the connotation of a particular discipline that you adopt in your practice. So it's not just any other mode of conduct. You take up a particular practice and you apply yourself seriously to this practice, and you develop a mode of conduct in that practice. So sometimes it is called yogic discipline, sometimes it is called just discipline. So here, Shantideva is saying that if you don't adopt the discipline of the mind, which means that if you don't guard the mind, it doesn't matter that you practice other modes of conduct. So again, in Khenpo Kumpen's presentation, he explains it in a really nice way. I think that it totally cuts to the chase. It says, except for the discipline in the middle of the paragraph, except for the discipline of the tantrikas who wear white cotton and long hair, right? So that's a reference to Tibetan yogis, right? So sometimes you see Tibetan yogis with long hair or, different ornaments and white cloth and so forth. So except for the discipline of the tantrikas with white cotton and long hair, and the discipline for the ordained who wear saffron robes, serving as a support for shame and embarrassment as methods for guarding one's mind, what is the use of a multitude of different kinds of disciplines to fruitless trouble of wearing white cotton and binding one's head on top of one's head, or of putting saffron garments and the like, unless they serve as a support for guarding the mind through shame and embarrassment? Do you know there is no use at all? So here, it is the point that is emphasized is that if you don't guard your mind, and to guard your mind, you also need to have shame and embarrassment, Khenpo Kumpen says, which allows you to, or it helps you to abstain from wrongdoings, either taking others as reasons or taking yourself as reasons, right? So thinking that I'm a monk, so I cannot behave like that. Or I'm a Buddhist practitioner, I cannot behave like that. Or if others see me behaving like that and they know that I'm a monk, it would be totally embarrassing to the community of monastics. So if others see me behaving like that and they know that I'm an avid Buddhist, they would think that all Buddhists therefore are behaving like that all Buddhists are badly behaved. So that mode of shame and embarrassment are crucial for guarding one's ethical discipline. So if we don't guard the mind in that way, with mindfulness, alertness, shame and embarrassment, conscientiousness and so forth, we might be wearing robes, we might be using different implements, drum and a bell and vajra and so forth. What is the use of using all of those different implements, having the Buddhist fashion and so forth, without guarding the mind? So then, looking at verse 19, it says, just as I would be attentive and conscientious of a wound when amidst an unruling freed crowd, so should I always guard the wound of my mind when dwelling amongst negative people. I think that this is also quite straightforward, but it just gave me, when I looked at the last two lines, I should always guard the wounds of my mind when dwelling amongst negative people. Here, negative people can be taken to begin with. You can say the easiest, the simplest way of interpreting that would be negative friends or people of bad behavior. in that they would cause you to behave negatively. But also I think that you could say in a more general way, sometimes when you perform activities with others, either your Buddhist friends, sometimes your non-Buddhist friends, sometimes there's an easier tendency to engage with non-virtuous things. It's like, for example, when I spend some time with my family, which obviously I think that obviously most of them are non-Buddhist, or with old friends, there's the tendency of slipping into previous ways of acting and speaking and so forth, where when I'm here, it is easier to be on guard because everyone is doing the same thing, right? We are with like-minded people, we support each other in our practice. But then when you're not with people, like-minded people, it's easier to just go back to how it used to be before. So in those situations, even more so, you should be on guard and kind of protect yourself, but it's hard, isn't it?
So they say that you let your guard down.
Yeah, you let your guard down, you let your hair down. Yeah. Yeah.
No, you let your hair down, you don't let your guard down.
Yeah.
It seems that even if you have a supportive community, say if you're in a relationship with someone who supports that those afflictions arise really strongly with people that even are supportive.
Yeah.
You kind of wonder whether getting into close relationships with people is also a negative thing to do sometimes because those afflictions come out so strongly.
Well, I think probably you have to mitigate your relationships in general. It's like, I think that if you look at, if you look at the way that Buddha propounded ethical discipline, then, it caters for everyone. He catered for everyone in providing them ethical discipline, but still, when you look at the ethical discipline of the Pratimoksha, then you have to begin with ethical discipline for lay practitioners. And the Buddha said it's not a game of all or nothing. You can take whatever ethical discipline suits you for the time being. You can even go for a one-day vow if you cannot guard everything for the rest of your life. And then if you can guard everything for the rest of your life as a lay practitioner, do that, but still aspire to do better, aspire to be a monastic. If you're already a monastic, aspire for higher ordination. So indeed, I think that kind of even within relationship, it's kind of, there is a way of kind of, there is a situation where there is even a greater chance for afflictions to arise. Particularly, let's leave aside desire, but I think that when you're in a close relationship with another person and they know how to push your button, in that situation, it's even easier to be annoyed, to be irritated, to get into a heated discussion that turns out to be almost like a hateful argument. So it happens in relationships. At least it happened to me before when I was in relationships. So I agree with you, but then try your best. I've been following the news from Israel. And the government in Israel is totally corrupt, and it seems that the society is on the brink of collapsing. Everyone is at each other's throat and so forth. And there are some inspiring demonstrations that are happening now in Israel. And every once in a while, kind of find myself daydreaming about, if I were there, I would join those demonstrations. But then I think that if I join the demonstrations, it's so hard to avoid being negative, to avoid being angry, frustrated, to then take sides in kind of we are the good guys and they are the bad guys. It's difficult to avoid that way of thinking. So that was that was one thing that came up to my mind when in relation to having to protect yourself when we're in the midst of the crowd. You find yourself in a crowd, it's so easy to be carried away. So that's verse 19. So I should always guard the wound of my mind when dwelling amongst negative people, not only negative people in general, but also in situations that our afflictions would be likely to be met with conditions that would activate them, that will fuel them, that will increase them. They don't have to be negative people in general, but there are situations that do give rise to afflictions. So we should be extra careful.
I guess in one way like that is, the advice to Sangha members to spend more time with other Sangha members than with lay people, so that we protect them against.
Yeah.
So,
Sometimes I remember that, we had periods in the past where we had some, I wouldn't say conflicts in the community, in the monastic community, because it sounds really heavy, but we had, disagreements. Some people were thinking that we should do this, and other people thought that we should do that. So it seems that there's almost like those two camps. And I would go home and think that, it's so difficult living like that. But actually, it's much easier to live with like-minded people that at least share the same values and have the same goals, which is something that we sometimes overlook. We live with each other, we hang out with each other, we sometimes have issues or kittens with each other, but then, so everything becomes really big in our mind, but we still share the same values and we have common goals. Whereas, if you think that, it's not working for me because I disagree with the people around me here in my community, and then you think that therefore I should leave, or I should go out, I need some space. Actually, it is likely that you will have more problems long term because you're not going to be hanging out with like-minded people. You're not going to share the same values. So at least this is what I try to remind myself every once in a while, that after all, we have a tendency of being discontented, right? This is what we face within cyclic existence, a sense of dissatisfaction. It's working for me now, but in 5 minutes from now, it's not going to work. So then I need to change my situation. I need to do something else. It's not my problem. It's somebody else's problem. It's because they're behaving like that I'm being made unhappy and so forth. So easy to think about it like that, but we're still, we're living with like-minded people. We share the same values or same goals. So it's, I need to remind myself that every once in a while when I get cranky. So then in verse 20, let's look at for a second where we are. So then we're looking at extensive explanation of making effort in guiding the mind. So verse 20 gives us the reasons for it is necessary to guard it. I think that this is quite straightforward. The benefits of guarding it is quite straightforward. And devoting oneself to mindfulness in order to guard the mind. Let's just go through that quickly. So it says, the reason, if I'm conscientious of a wound through the fear of small suffering of a wound, then why do I not guard the wounds of my mind through the fear of being crushed by the mountains of mass destructions there, not the mountain crushing hell? So this verse assumes that we are mindful of, first of all, death and impermanence, but also what will occur to us in future life, which is also something that we, I think, don't often think of. We find a certain situation to be annoying. Right, so if I try to protect myself from a slight cut or just a sore in relation to the body in this life, then why do I not protect myself from greater suffering and longer suffering in future states of existence? This is what verse 20 is saying. That requires a greater recollection of future lifetimes, past and future lifetimes. So then the benefit of behaving in this way in verse 21, should I behave in such a way, then whether amongst negative people or even amongst the midst of women, here women, keep in mind that Shantideva was a monk living at Nalanda monastery. So for him, as and it seems that kind of in the beginning of the text, it says that I wrote this text I wrote this manual in order to acquaint my mind with the deeds of Bodhisattva. So it says for me, when I'm in the crowds of women where my desire is likely to be triggered, if I guard my mind, I would be able to still maintain my vow and not allow it to degenerate. So as Geshe said today, you can change it over. If you can change it over to a man, whatever might be your sexual preference or other preference, you can work it out. I think just to, practice in a way that accords with the spirit of this verse. I'm wondering is anyone more familiar with the history of Nalanda? Did they have also a community of nuns at Nalanda or just monks? Sorry?
There were nuns first. I believe they started from women.
Oops. Immaculate Conception, I assume. Yeah. Oops. Yeah. But I think that there's this story actually with Shantideva now. It's Sunday. I remember that. This account of writing Shantideva's Guide to Bodhisattva Way of Life was also related to a community of nuns, right? So a community of nuns, they were asking for teachings. So then the guys from the Nalanda monastery wanted to mock the nuns. So they sent Shantideva, who was regarded as someone that is only engaged in eating, sleeping, and going to the toilet. So they wanted to mock the nuns. So they sent Shantideva. So the nuns were said to have erected this big throne that Shantideva couldn't climb. So, he came to the throne, he touched the throne came down like an electric throne. Sat on the throne and taught the Guide to Bodhisattva Way of Life. This is one of the stories. I guess that different versions of the story. So apparently there were some nuns around. And they...
But when you go there, it doesn't have an area where it says the nun.
I think quite early in its history, that changed.
Yeah, they were outside the gate.
Well, I think that probably we have to keep in mind that traditionally monastic communities were kept completely apart. So I would actually be surprised if there was like a chapel or a college within Nalanda that was the nuns' part. Even in Tibet, monks and nuns are traditionally kept separately, and there is a reason for that. Sorry?
All faiths, monastics have always been kept really separate.
Yeah. So then calling us to make effort in guarding the mind, it is better to be without gain, honor, body, and sustenance. And it is better to let other virtues degenerate rather than ever to let the mind degenerate. After all, we said that if you drop the guard, if you drop your guards, if you let the mind degenerate, if you let the vows degenerate, it brings about not only a bit of suffering in this life, but even greater suffering in future lifetimes. It postpones your attainment of the grounds. You're connected with miserable states of existence. You're in there for a long period. So it's better to be without gain in this life, honor, body, and sustenance, which means that it is so much better to be without the 8 worldly concerns, in short, right? Liking gain, disliking no gain, liking honor or fame, disliking infamy, liking pleasure, disliking pain. So it is better to be free from the 8 worldly concerns. So, Geshe spoke about, to you wish to guard your minds, that thus fold my hands and urge you. At the cost of your life, guard mindfulness and introspection. So, then the method of guarding the mind, guarding mindfulness and introspection. So we've covered, I think, the brief presentation, 23, and then the disadvantages of lacking introspection, which I thought that were quite straightforward. We might just mention them briefly. But what I wanted to do is to look at mindfulness and introspection to begin with, just to make sure that we're know roughly what we're speaking about. I think that Geshe will likely to go over mindfulness and introspection, mindfulness and alertness later on, but still, I think that those are things that are good to go over again and again. I mean, I find myself even today, although I've been covering mindfulness and introspection for many years here in the study program, there's still some doubts and questions and new perspectives and angles that I think of in relation to the two and how they work in one's own meditation practice and other practices as well. So I think that it's always good to revisit them. So I think that many of you have probably encountered the definition of mindfulness. Anyone has it at the tip of your fingers? I mean, you don't have to be precise, but just to, can you indicate what the nature of mindfulness is? Not forgetfulness of the object. Yeah, not forgetfulness of the object. Particularly, I would add to that something, not forgetfulness of a familiar object. Yeah, so that's spot on. So, and I think that it's a good way to be, it's good to be precise about mindfulness, because mindfulness has become such a buzzword in our regular society. Now everyone is speaking about mindfulness in relationship, mindfulness in business, mindfulness in classroom, mindfulness in this and that. So, and also I think that there is a tendency of saying that mindfulness comes from Buddhism and so on and so forth. Actually, mindfulness is also practiced in Hindu tradition, right? So it has a common basis of Buddhism and Hinduism. But the way that in Buddhism it is defined is just non-forgetfulness of a familiar object, which means that to be mindful of a certain object, first of all, you need to know what it is. You need to know what it is in a precise way as much as you can. Even if you haven't realized it, you need to at least know what it is. You cannot be mindful of something that you do not know, that you do not understand. Which means that mindfulness has to have an object. Now, when you look at the breakdown of different practices of mindfulness, like for example, in the Kagyu tradition, there is a presentation of mindfulness and a discussion of different types of mindfulness, and one of them is mindfulness without an object. But even mindfulness without an object is still focusing on a particular thing. So it has a particular understanding. It's not that the mind is not engaged with any object whatsoever. You can say that the object is the mind, or kind of certain focus to the mind. Sorry? Yeah. It is awareness, general awareness, but rather than speaking about particularly an external object like a ball of light or a sensation, or you can say internal objects like sensation of the body and so forth. There is a type of objectless mindfulness, but it still has an object. You're still not unforgetful. You have non-forgetfulness with respect to a familiar object. So that's mindfulness. Now, what is introspection or vigilance? Vigilance, introspection, alertness. In Tibetan, the word is sheshin. Yeah, sheshin. In English, it is translated as introspection, vigilance, or alertness.
Sometimes it's said that it's the ability of the mind to observe the mind.
It is the ability of the mind to observe the mind. Quality control. Paul is saying something similar. It is checking.
Recognizing when the mind's going into activity and bringing it back.
So checking whether the mind has fallen into laxity or excitation and bringing it back to the object. Yeah, often they are explained together, mindfulness and alertness. Mindfulness, remembering the object of meditation, and alertness, checking on it, like a spy. So these things are correct. But one thing that I wanted to highlight, a couple of things actually, is that to begin with, mindfulness is a mental factor. Right, so mindfulness comes within the 5 object ascertaining mental factors. It is not virtuous. It is not non-virtuous. You can say that if you're mindful of a virtuous object, that mindfulness will also become virtuous. So mindfulness is part of the 5 object ascertaining mental factors. And with respect to introspection or alertness, there is no separate mental factor that is allocated for that. But interestingly, there is non-introspection within the 20 secondary afflictions. Right? So we are contrasting the two, non-introspection and introspection, or non-alertness, non-vigilance, with alertness and vigilance. So we have a mental factor and a definition of mental factor for lack of introspection or non-alertness, but we don't have the opposite. So I thought it's actually, we can get a sense of what vigilance, introspection, alertness is when we look at the opposite of that within the 20 secondary afflictions. So let's look at that. So as I said, it is part of the 20 secondary afflictions. Sorry? No, non-introspection. Yeah. Yes. So non-introspection is the wisdom that is concomitant with afflictions and engages unknowingly in activities of body, speech, and mind. If you look at the way that it is explained, that it is written in English, non-introspection is Sheshin, in Tibetan, Sheshin Maimba. So Sheshin is introspection. Sheshin Maimba is negating introspection and becoming non-introspection. She in Tibetan is knowing, can also be wisdom, but here it is better, I think better translated as knowing. And Shin gives it the flavor of doing something continuously. So you're doing something knowingly with Sheshin. So you're knowingly engaging activities of body, speech, and mind. The opposite of that is non-introspection, which is engaging unknowingly in activities of body, speech, and mind. It is acting as a support for infractions. So particularly when we think about it in relation to the vows that we have, like for example, the Pratimoksha vow, being a monastic, being a layperson, we have certain things that we need to guard, that we need to abstain from. Often, first of all, our mind doesn't remember what we need to do. I mean, often it's even the case that we don't know what we need to do, isn't it? It's like sometimes you take a vow. How many of us have taken before the Bodhisattva vow without knowing what are the 18 root downfalls and the 46 secondary offenses? You know, I'm in that group. Now I've taken it many times without knowing what I need to do. Yeah, and the same thing also with the tantric vow, right? So we take a vow, we have no idea what we need to abstain from, what we need to do, what we need not to do, but also we don't find out, right? We're not motivated enough to find out what we need to do in order to guard the vow. You know, I'm also in that group. You know, when I've taken the Bodhisattva vow in multiple times, my enthusiasm was quite small. So, you know, I didn't really check what I need to be doing. It's just more like, yeah, it's a good thing to do. Take the Bodhisattva vow. So because of that, unknowingly, I engaged in activities of body, speech, and mind that were adverse to what I need to be doing. I violated, I had infractions of the vow because of not knowing what I need to abstain from. So that's one reason. Another reason is that even if I know what I need to abstain from, there is forgetfulness of the mind, which means that at a time in which I'm not mindful, which means there is no unforgetfulness with respect to a familiar object, there is forgetfulness with respect to that object. So let's look at forgetfulness. It is an unclarity of mind and forgetting of virtuous objects for mindfulness of objects of the afflictions. Right, so mindfulness of objects of the afflictions. I'm mindful of my object of desire. I either desire to have a relationship with someone, or I desire wealth and food and gain and honor and so forth. And in attending my mind to that again and again and again, I forget what I need to be abstaining from.
I was thinking of the verse in the 8th verse, vigilant the moment of delusion.
Yeah.
So you've got to have the vigilance, you've got to know what the delusion or affliction is about, you've got to recognize.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think that, now those of you at home, I think that you should probably, I think that Mike should have picked up what Venerable Chuki was saying, but she was referring to the verse from the 8 verses for training the mind. Vigilant, the moment the delusion arises in my mind, endangering myself and others, I will forcefully avert it without delay. Confront and avert it without delay. Thank you. So we spoke about non-introspection. So introspection would be to engage with something knowingly, right? So how does it work here in terms of what Shantideva is saying, engaging with something knowingly? And how is it related then to the cultivation of concentration, which requires also mindfulness and alertness? So it seems to me that here, the way that Shantideva is speaking about it is, he says that you've taken the vow. You have committed yourself to guard the training, to train. You need to guard the training. You need conscientiousness. You need to guard the mind in the training through mindfulness and alertness. So the training refers to what you should be doing. What you should be doing is practice, to practice the 6 perfections, practice the 4 ways of gathering disciples. What you should not be doing are things that are adverse to the training, the 18 root downfalls, the 46 secondary offenses. You should not allow self-cherishing attitude to arise in your mind. You should not submit to the afflictions. So those are the trainings, right, in general. But particularly, I think that you could say that with respect to what you ought not to do, the things, because normally we speak about what you need to do and what we ought not to do, what you need to take up, what you need to discard, what you need to practice, what you need to abandon. So what we need to abandon, what we need to discard, are the 18 root downfalls and the 46 secondary offenses. So, first of all, we have mindfulness, which means we need to be mindful of what we ought to do and what we're not to do, which means we have to remember what they are. It is non-forgetfulness with respect to a familiar object. This is what mindfulness is, right? So we have to be mindful of the 46 secondary offenses and the 18 root downfalls. We have to remember what they are. So in order to remember what they are, we first of all memorize them. So in previous exams also asked you to memorize the 18 root downfalls and so forth. In some sense you can set up, we should also memorize the 46 secondary offenses, but it's hard to ask others to do it if I haven't done it myself, you know. But we have to do it, right? I mean, if we need to guard the trainings, we have to be mindful of what we need to discard. We need to be mindful of the 46 secondary offenses to begin with, non-forgetfulness of a familiar object. And then we need also to apply introspection, which is doing something knowingly, which means that I think that one aspect, or actually let's begin with something else. First of all, with respect to introspection or vigilance, it is normally explained as every once in a while, every so often, introspection kicks in and checks that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. So we're practicing what we need to be practicing, that we're avoiding what we should be avoiding. So that's periodical checking. I'm still doing it, and I'm still doing it, and I'm still doing it, and so forth. Am I avoiding non-virtuous action? So it should pick up our engagement or initial engagement, or we're about to engage in a non-virtuous action, in a root downfall, in a secondary offense, and then immediately make amendments. Bring back mindfulness, remembering what we need to be doing. I should have abstained from that negative action. I should have abstained from the root downfall. So normally introspection is explained with respect to checking that we're not doing what we ought to be doing. But I think that, you know, in the same token, you could say that if we have taken the Bodhisattva vow and we've made that commitment to work for the sake of others, to train in the deeds of Bodhisattvas, we should also be practicing generosity and ethics and patience and so forth. So you can also say that it is introspection with respect to what we ought to be doing. No, not only with respect to what we ought not to be doing, but also check that we are being generous, that we are being patient, that we do have joyous effort. So there could be occasions in which, for example, there might be not a coarse non-virtue present in our mind, or that we're not engaging with something that is strongly non-virtuous, but we're just kicking back and relaxing. I mean, you could say that probably falling prey to laziness of being indolent, or, you know, being not that enthused about virtue is also included within the 46 secondary offenses in one way or in a few ways. It is included within that, right? Not doing enough for the sake of others. We've covered that before. So mindfulness, so introspection with respect to the things that we should be doing is also reminding ourselves again and again that we should have joyous effort, that we should be applying ourselves to virtue, that we should be using our time skillfully, that we should not be wasting time on just browsing the net endlessly, watching YouTube clips endlessly, which I do quite a lot, you know. So it's not only referring to the negative side, but also we need to remind ourselves of what we need to make sure that we also be having more on the positive side of things. So we, for the time being, how should I say that? So it's that, to begin with, is it a clear description, a general description of what mindfulness and alertness are? Then just to kind of also add something to what Shedap said, or I don't know if it's to add to that, it's often we speak about mindfulness and alertness also with respect to the practice of shamatha. So in the practice of shamatha, it is said that you need to have mindfulness of the object. So you have chosen an object of meditation, let's say an image of Buddha. This is what you're using for a single pointed concentration. And then you have alertness that kicks in every so often, in order to make sure that you're still with the object, that your mind hasn't fallen to excitation in which the mind wanders off the object of meditation, or that the mind hasn't fallen prey to laxity, So it seems that here there is a more specific application of mindfulness and alertness. So you can have mindfulness with respect to many objects, it seems. Mindfulness of the instructions, mindfulness of the 18 root downfalls and the 46 secondary offenses. But then also mindfulness of the object of concentration, single point concentration. So it seems that altogether mindfulness could be of the trainings, a few objects, or mindfulness of one object. Alertness or introspection could be introspection with respect to mindfulness, checking that mindfulness is doing what it's doing with respect to many objects, in that checking that we're not engaging with what we ought not to be doing, that we're still doing what we should be doing, or in a very specific one, that that is alertness with respect to making sure that we're still single-pointedly placed upon an object without laxity and excitation. Does it make sense? So here, so of those, it seems that of those various ways of applying mindfulness and alertness, here in chapter number 5, the one that Shantideva explains is mindfulness with respect to the training, which means mindfulness, it seems that with respect to a greater object or a diverse object, with what we need to do and what we ought not to do, and then doing it knowingly abstaining from wrongdoings, or knowingly also engaging with positive things. But the emphasis, it seems that in the explanation, is on the negative side. If we don't do what we are supposed to be doing, then the disadvantages of lacking introspection, it says, one will be separated from mindfulness and introspection. Any action one performs has little force. I think that we all know that from a personal experience, right? Shantideva doesn't have to explain that. We know that if we're doing meditations without mindfulness and introspection, they're not really meditations. They turn out to be just a recitation of something. It's funny, I had a conversation with Kathy during lunch break, and both of us have recollected occasions in which we were in retreat separately. We did, like, for example, the Yamantaka retreat for a month or a few weeks. And sometimes in the session, you finally discover that rather than doing the Yamantaka mantra, you're doing the Bodhisattva mantra, right? So without mindfulness and alertness, I guess it happens to many of us.
Concentration is virtuous.
No, it's also one of the 5 object ascertaining mental factors. So, you know, it's interesting because it is in the group of 5 object ascertaining mental factors, and the name of the group implies that there is a realization or ascertainment. So we can have ascertainment of things that are virtues, of course. We want to develop our mind so that we realize reality. But also we can use the 5 object ascertaining mental factors for things that are not necessarily virtuous. They could be just neutral. Like, for example, I suppose that you could cultivate, like, for example, with concentration, it is said that you can develop non-Buddhist ways of cultivating concentration, can even use an object of attachment for concentration. So, like, you can focus on your partner, for example, as an object for cultivating concentration. So in the presentation of how to choose your object of concentration within Lama Tsongkhapa's explanation, it says that although there are those universal objects for calm abiding, like, for example, even focusing on your partner, still, if you want to do it in a Buddhist way, which means that you want your concentration to be virtuous, then you focus on a virtuous object. So I think that the same thing would also apply to, do we speak about mindfulness? Concentration. Concentration, sorry. Yeah, so it seems like it can fall in all camps, but the one that we want to develop is virtuous. Yeah. So then the disadvantages of lacking introspection, which means not doing things knowingly, or it is engagement unknowingly with actions of body, speech, and mind. So wisdom will not become pure. Ethics will not become pure. That's quite reasonable. Virtues accumulated in the past will be destroyed. Let's look at that verse for a second. The thieves of non-introspection, in following upon the degeneration of mindfulness, will steal even the merits I have firmly gathered, so that I shall therefore proceed to lower realms. Yeah, we spoke about it before, how when non-virtues arise, they destroy the merits that we have created before, like one moment of anger destroys roots of virtues accumulated through countless eons, and then because of anger, I will be connected with future suffering and miserable states of existence. So that happens again because of a lack of mindfulness and introspection. So then the fifth point is the accomplishment of virtues not previously performed will be hindered. So this host of thieves of the afflictions will search for a good opportunity and occasion. Having found it, they will steal my virtue and destroy even life in a good migration.
This game of affliction, so they don't rob your afflictions, they rob your virtue.
Yeah. So
Afflictions who are robbers.
yeah, the afflictions are robbers. Yeah. These cunning afflictions. For some reason, I thought I kind of will cover that quickly today, and we'll have the time to speak about two more secondary offenses, but obviously I haven't got a grasp on good planning of time. Anyway, let's leave it here for now. Thank you very much, people. May I quickly become Guru, Lord Buddha, and lead each and every sentient being to his enlightened realm because of these merits. May the supreme jewel Bodhisattva, which is not arisen, rise and grow, and may that which is arisen never diminish, but increase more and more. In these snowy mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All powerful Chain Razik Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara. You uphold the seducer's moral way, who serves the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Machinath's victorious doctrine, who mercifully accomplishes magnificent prayers, honoring the three jewels. Protector of myself and others, your disciples, please live long. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Carson. Thank you, Reverend.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
I haven't seen Graham this week. Have you heard from Graham? Enjoying himself somewhere.